Hey, just a great big hello again for coming here with Painting in a Twist. There were a few questions we didn't answer last week, and I'd like to get to them today, so let me do that first. One of the things that we need to consider, of course, in approaching a painting is composition, and one of our students asked that. They ask, what exactly is composition? Composition is basically just how you apply the principles of art in organizing the elements of art, which are, of course, line, color, shape, shade, and space. And that's what we're going to consider right here at the beginning. For example, take this composition. The one on the left with all of the background behind the woman makes it a lot harder to see the woman. It's not that the drawing's any better or any worse. It's not that the expression is good or bad. It's that you don't really see the woman. What we introduced there is a concept of focal point. In other words, the one on the right, you see the woman. The one on the left, you see a bunch of stuff, and oh yeah, there's a picture of a woman. The second composition we're looking at is of a woman, a geisha girl, a Japanese drawing of a woman walking against the wind. The drawing is the same in both of them, but on the one on the right, you really feel that wind because of those diagonal lines that are pushing her backwards. And lastly, there's this composition of the footbridge with the stream underneath. The one on the left is certainly just as well rendered as the one on the right. It's just that it's got more clutter. The one on the right, what you see is the flowing of that water, and you see that bridge kind of coming forward to you because that water flow makes you focus on it. We need to talk more about that, but I promise you, composition is fundamental to the success of your work. Another question was asked about color and how do we mix it. I'm giving you a brief color chart here, and I'll be happy to send you any kind of links that are helpful. But typically, if you work with the pigmentation of color, you're working with three primaries, which are yellow, red, and blue. And then you have what you get when you mix those primaries called secondaries. Yellow with red, red with blue, blue with yellow. And then you have tertiaries, which is the next stage. This is a little example, a chart. I'll send you a link to this as well. I spoke with you briefly about how I like to tone my canvas, and here's an example of what I'm working with right now, these metallic acrylic colors. Typically what I do with these is I put them on the canvas and then I just kind of mess them around until I have a total covering of the canvas surface. That gives me kind of a real charge when I start putting color on it. Acrylic dries quickly and it is not hard then to move into it. So this is the startup that we started with. I have basically my tone canvas, my palette, and I told you that I use the disposable palettes just for convenience. And then on the right of that, I have the media, which I'm using stand oil, linseed oil, and turpentine. And to the right of that is just the turpentine to keep my brushes cleaned. Little palette knife there, my favorite, but I mean they're all kinds. So experiment, find something you're comfortable with. Remember, we started just finding those forms. Very interested in negative spaces. I taught drawing long enough to know how significant they are for kind of interceding and getting rid of those symbol systems we have in that right brain of our life. We ended with just laying all the colors in on the palette. That is getting the bold colors right, the shading colors right, and some of the others. So at this point, I'm going to try to smooth those colors around. I'm going to see if it's not possible to blend using what I've got there on my palette. Some of those colors, especially the oranges, go back and possibly finding the highlight shapes. and then dipping into some of those wonderful deep, deep darks and see if I can't somehow formulate what that concept is about. Always like to have my paper towels there. Always like to be prepared for any kind of, well, just smearing around of paint. Know enough to know that I need to keep it as clean as possible, hence the use of the paper and not just finger painting. So getting my brush just right with solvent and medium, then I'm going to go in for a little bit more of that orange. I'm going to see if I can smooth that, develop that. It looks like a nice, bright, bright, light, medium orange there. If I glance at my photograph, I see that I'm going to need to put some of that darker reds in there. So you'll see me with my brush going down and picking up some of that red and kind of somehow develop that three-dimensional roundedness. The darkers, of course, being deeper and more in shadow, the lighters being more touched by, in fact, that wonderful highlight that's coming across. Getting a little dark down there. I want to be sure I can make that seem like it recesses down in the, maybe not the bottom part of the bowl, but certainly shaded enough. And then there's that little section that picks up a little bit of that light reflection off of the bowl. So there again, now I'm not analyzing this as I paint, I'm visualizing it, okay? That's that left brain, right brain thing that makes you a little crazy. Left brain wants to measure, analyze. Right brain just wants to do it and feel it. So all I can say here is feel it. Now I'm using some of the darker tones in there, looking for a little bit, probably of the purples, to make that darker, but still warm. I don't want it to be moving to that cool zone of the bowl, although in one point we're going to add a little bit of that cool zone because that light reflected onto the shape of the tangerine is the blue light that comes off of the bowl. And there's a piece. I didn't realize when I started this composition, didn't think about it, I didn't realize this was a lemon. I thought I'm just doing tangerines and I couldn't figure out, why is this one yellow? That was on that, I don't know, that brief kind of brainstem reaction. I never really verbalized it to myself, but I was really dealing with it. And I'm going in for that yellow, but you watch. As I paint this, it gets oranger and oranger until the very last part where I look back at it and it's like, oh gosh, it's not a tangerine, that's a lemon. I don't know. This was an arrangement that was on my table, I think somewhere after Christmas briefly. Just, kind of like we get away from all the clutter of Christmas and we want to get into maybe the natural. I don't know. I do. I feel happy about nature. I guess you do too, or we wouldn't be doing this. Anyway, looking again to develop that form by where my darks are, where my lights are, feeling. I'm sensing that that's just a little different. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to go up here and see if I can't make this work. Now, this one, I believe in the composition, is one of the brightest tangerines. And this is part of the conflict. See, I'm saying this is bright, but I'm also seeing that lemon is bright. And it's not, I don't get why it is, because the tangerine's really a little bit above the lemon and picking up more light in the reflection. But you watch. I'll work that out at some point. Now, the reason you see, of course, it's not, you've got a medium tone. This is why I like that bronze underpainting, is it's not this bright white, so I have an immediate, where I'm putting that paint down, I have an immediate kind of highlight because there's white canvas showing through. I have that nice kind of medium colored bronze that's coming through, which every once in a while gives a little metallic sparkle, which I really respond to. Okay, this is another time where I have to learn that lesson about don't mix the complement if you're shading it. I really want the complement here. I really want the shade here. but I really want it to be very, very, very warm. So eventually you're going to see me go in there and get enough, hopefully, enough red to make that a warm shadow, not a. And then you see, I'm thinking about the red. You see a little of that red coming in, and on that tangerine on the top left, I'm really trying to make that a warm one because it really is a deep, nice tone. Playing with the cool tones of the blue and the warm tones of the red and the oranges is kind of a fun thing too. So, and looking for that form, see how that brush goes back in, tries to find that rounded surface. Don't want to draw it with a line, but want to find it with a shape. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but it does. Now I'm getting really a little concerned about those shaded areas because they also do a lot in terms of making sure that shape and that volume is there. Okay, we've got the blending kind of coming where it needs to be here. You can see those colors if you compare the colors of the painting to the colors of the photograph to its right. You can see they're beginning to come together. And this is where I'm getting it. This little chart right here shows you that I've got that particular is a Chinese red and a cad yellow medium, and then the medium there that I'm playing with now is the orange where you put them together. And it's a constant interplay of how orange, how yellow, how red, and that's the fun. Okay, now I'm a little concerned about making that those shapes work. I'm looking at my photograph thinking, okay, how am I going to make these all go together like the photograph? Now, it hadn't quite dawned on me that's a lemon, not a tangerine. It doesn't matter particularly, but it nevertheless has not dawned on me. Okay, I'm about where I want to be on these fruits. I'm still kind of messing with the yellows and the reds, a little bit darker, where you've got all that orange highlight reflection coming together. It gets really intense and a very nice kind of red. So careful with that. Still being aware of those edges. Want to be sure you can tell where one edge overlaps another. Just touches. Don't want the line to be important, but I want those edges to suggest what a line might be. And that's kind of the what's going on here. I've got to get that shape just right. There, just, yeah, a little reflection. Okay, now I'm a little worried about the shading. Want to keep it warm. Want to keep it accurate though in terms of how it overlaps. That little shadow down on the edge is bothering me a little, but I think if I work with it and then a little bit of that, oh yeah, almost right over there, just to make that shape what I'm seeing in the photograph. Okay, winding it up. I think I've got it about where I want it in terms of the pieces of fruit and how they're modeled and look three-dimensional. So I'm about ready to back off of this and maybe clean a few brushes. We'll see before I start the next part. Okay, now let's see what we need to do. Highlights are worrying me a little bit. That means I'm going for the wipe off. Got to be sure I've got enough terp. I think I'm okay. And make sure that I've got a nice clean brush so that I can lift where I want to put that white paint in. I don't want to put darker paint in on top of white paint because all it does is get lighter. But I do want to here take some of those colors off, okay? Get that paint off so I can lay in a nice bright white. And I'm looking for a bright white. I don't want a white like blue white. I want a yellow warm white because that's the light that I'm in right here. That's what making those oranges or tangerines sparkle, and I'm using incandescent light, so it's a warm light. So I want to show that in this photograph. Looking for those shapes, looking at my photograph for a resource. Want to make sure I get the feeling of that bowl being very, very round. It takes a little work thinking about it, keeping it smooth. You know, adjusting this white shape is a small thing, but it makes a huge difference in where it is and exactly what you want this to convey. It gives you a sense of what that bowl's about. just those little bits, just that little piece of white that makes it work, that makes it look like, yeah, a real reflection. And it describes the bowl. It's not just it's not just giving us a color, it describes where that bowl shape is. Now, the handles on the bowl, which are kind of funny, it's a strange little bowl. The handles on the bowl, I kind of agonize over a little bit. I just want them to look rounded, but I don't want them to take away from really what the focal point of this is, which is the tangerines and the color and the depth and the kind of nice combination of the bowl and the tangerines. Okay, now what I'm trying to do is find that curve. You see on the right side of that tangerine, it's going to show me that as it goes underneath that tangerine, there's a little bit of that curve that's just going to touch on the other side. And making that talk to me, making that describe that shape is going to give me that sense of depth in the bowl, roundness to the contours. Um, so, in a way, even though it seems painstaking, and it is, in a way, it's those little things right at the end. So, take a few minutes, look carefully at what you're doing, and think about where that's going to take you. Well, I think this is the end of the painting thing. Now I'm going to push it back, think about it a little while, and see what my so what moment is. What is going to make this, in fact, make it a painting and not just a rendition of something that a photograph could have done a better job at. And that is where I'm going to have to do some real pushing into that left side of my brain, okay, or the right side of my brain. Push away from the left side of my brain. Not analyze or want to specify, but just kind of feel what the difference is. And hopefully we'll get there. Getting there means I'm going to think about colors. I wanted some better highlights, and you can see that on this. I wanted more of a trend toward a green bowl instead of the blue, and I wanted those shadows to be deeper than what that blue was giving me. So I've added a little more white, I've added a little more of that phthalo green. I've gone into those shadows and worked a little bit of that violet, which I think responds well. And where those tangerines are reflected in the bowl light, I've added just a splash or two of orange. Now, it makes me feel better. I think this is getting us. I'm sorry that the colors that you're seeing on this particular photograph are not maybe as true as what the painting is. But you know what? I'm going to go put this over in the gallery off the square, which is in Georgetown, and invite you all to come see the original, and you can at least get an idea of the frustration of dealing with photographs. But for sure you can see the painting up close and personal, and it'll be fun to talk about it maybe at some point. Anyway, I invite you to come see us over there. Really looking forward to seeing more of your work and working together. And next week, which we're going outside and working the plein air stuff.